So excited to be reading with and introducing Deborah Clearman, who's going to be reading from a new book, which is The Angels at Sinkhole County. Awesome book. But what I thought I'd do is make a connection to, or be clear about a connection, or give a connection to what Deborah and I share with some of the people here, and what I think also some people in the audience, which is a place called Vermont Studio Center. And I just spent the night last night hanging out with some folks at the old Black Mountain College Museum, sorry, the old Black Mountain College campus out at Lake Eden. And it was a retreat, a writing retreat. And they reminded me of Vermont Studio Center and what we shared from Vermont Studio Center. Mary Jo's in the audience, my mom is here, Beth is development director, and Deborah's on the board. I used to be on the board. Is what I think is the spirit of Asheville at its best, and the spirit of Black Mountain College, which is artists coming together and collaborating and having a good time. What I would like to do is read two pieces about my experience at Vermont Studio Center, and then I'll back up and introduce you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Just two quick pieces. And the first one is called Winter Residency, and it comes from time when I was probably in my 40s, and I was there for 2 weeks. This is in northern Vermont, and it was the opposite of what it is now. It was snowy and cold, and I still went outside a lot. Winter residency. When the snow dislodges then drops off the roof in a miniature landslide, it sounds as though a hunter has fired his gun in the woods. A buck bolting from its frozen stance. A reverberation hangs like sulfur in the sun. And I'm up here in my room, casting out line after line of poetry, reeling them back in, free to walk around in this robe of sun, to wade through puddles of refracted light, snow glare everywhere. I've just come from, or will soon set out on, another long walk up, further into the hills. I trek to the top of my breath, then descend its ladder back to this desk. When I lay down my gloves, lines for poems fall out. When I rise up from a nap, scraps of paper float to the floor like snow. The ice on the paths place our feet in a shuffle dance. Go slow. In line for lunch, all I can say to the men and women next to me, who right now are my closest friends, who share with me this abundant board, fresh bread warm in our grateful hands, is thank you, thank you. I wrote that the morning I left, and I tacked it up on the wall of the dining hall for people to, which is nice. The spirit of that place, and I think why we're both,
yes,
and why you're doing it, drawn to it. Obviously, the COVID and the pandemic hit places like Vermont Studio Center extra hard, and as we know from living in where we live, Asheville is this abundant place, but we're living in a county that's not as abundant. It's a place that's struggled and has always struggled, and northern Vermont is the same. And so, so an artist retreat center, and it shut down, and it had to come back from the dead, really. And we, as a board, I left the board a year or so after it was all through, but I came back to the campus after 2.5 years away from it. Mm-hmm. And that was the time when we first met. And the campus was under a kind of renovation and a transformation. And I took a walk with two of the people on staff who you'll meet in this piece, looking at what they had done and what buildings had been brought down and what buildings were coming up. And we were joined by a cat named Houdini. Houdini on the prowl at the Vermont Studio Center after a few years away. Some cats seem forever to stalk down alleyways. There's a subtle swagger to their gait, the casual ease of a gunfighter passing down an empty main street. Houdini is such a cat. Bruiser, Mauser, Tom. He follows us as we tour the grounds and stops with us as we note the conspicuous absence of this old barn, that tumble down garage. Trimming back before wreath growth is how one trustee phrased it. taking dead weight offline as gyms. Whatever it's called, it's eerie and exhilarating to come upon half-remembered forms floating over freshly seeded plots like seeing ghosts. When we emerge from a moldy basement of a soon-to-be refurbished building, Houdini slinks down the steps and disappears into the murk. Jim leaves the door open, and we head over to the river, past one old structure and through a newly opened field. I've made my way down here a dozen times, which makes me feel like a tracker coming upon an old scent. This way to the river bend, that way to the old baseball field, now an arboretum. Trevor says he's not been down here since the COVID shutdown. Before turning back, we talk about past complications, board squabbles, founder syndrome, and the like, and share hope for some small portion of healing. We pause at an old carriage barn, now a smoking hut, where I'm told an occasional through hiker sets up camp before being kindly shooed away. The afternoon chill creeps under our shirts. Houdini reappears, cobwebs crowning his head. He watches us for a moment and yawns and licks his paw.
Nice, thank you so much. Those were beautiful.
I wanted to bring it back because
Yeah,
it's what we share, and I know we share. You were originally from North Carolina.
I was born here,
Yeah.
but I didn't spend more than a couple of years.
Same with me.
Okay.
Yeah, and you are also really deeply connected to Guatemala.
Deeply connected to Guatemala, yes.
And I think that's a connection that we share with Mary Jo, who is also connected to DSC. So there's a real sense of family here. But what I wanted to do is just kind of tell people that they're in for a treat with this book, to actually back up and read her first, not her first book, but the most recent book before this, Remedios, which is set in Guatemala.
That's right.
And, but also just have a good time. What Deborah does, which is hard to do in fiction, is that she creates kind of old school, you know, somebody said, what is it, Faulkner meets?
Yeah, it was very, it's on the front cover, it's very complimentary.
Yeah, it's hard to live up to, but
yes.
William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying
Yes.
meets Barbara King Oliver's Diamond Copperhead. But what you do share with them is knowing how to set up a situation where you know things are going to go awry, and you know it in your bones, but you don't know how it's going to go. And you meet some fascinating people that you, okay, I'm going to go on this ride. So this is going to be a ride. Deborah, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. And that was a beautiful intro because, yes, Vermont Studio Center is where we met and dear to my heart. And I've spent more than 2 decades going there and sharing the inspiration of the life of art and literature meeting and feeding each other, and that's what is so magical. And I think Black Mountain College was like that too.
It was summer session, especially.
Yes.
That's the link. I feel like. Yeah.
And so yeah, and another thing actually that a theme that ties all these places together is mountains. I'm a person who loves mountains. And I live in New York City now, not a lot of mountains, but drawn to Guatemala for mountains, to Vermont for mountains, and to the Appalachians. And so, but at any rate, my history, and so my history with,
I'm going to give you the stage.
oh no, you should sit next to me. No,
Sure.
please. I need moral support.
Okay. I'm back. Okay.
So yeah, so this book, The Angels of Sinkhole County, is set in West Virginia. And I was born in North Carolina, lived in 7 states, my first 7 years, ended up growing up on a farm in Southern Maryland. So rural life was kind of where I've always felt most comfortable. And despite having lived in New York City for the last 50 years, but never mind. So, and so my first 3 books of fiction were set in Guatemala, where I've lived off and on for the last 20 years. But when I was in college, my parents and my brother moved to West Virginia. And of course, even growing up, we had always come up to the mountains on camping trips from Southern Maryland up to the Blue Ridge. So the Blue Ridge is in my bones, and the Appalachian Mountains, and West Virginia, Virginia. We didn't usually get as far down as North Carolina in our camping trips, but we had good friends in North Carolina, so we did come down here sometimes. So I'm kind of spinning out. I don't really know what I'm saying. So at any rate, after this very long relationship with West Virginia, starting in 1970, I had considered West Virginia to be a second home. Spent summers, long vacations in all seasons, and loved the people as well as the mountains. And so finally, a little while ago, I started writing a novel set in West Virginia. And so, yeah, I think I'll start reading, and then we can go back more to why West Virginia, why Sinkhole County. Many people have asked me that question.
Just sounds good.
Not everybody agrees. But I'll read a little bit, then we can talk about Sinkhole County. So I'm going to start very close to the beginning. And the Roger Thorndike, known as the Major by his caregivers, has just died of old age in his home in rural West Virginia. At his bedside are his 3 caregivers, Loretta, Tammy, and Cass. Before they can call Major's grown children, Loretta tells them about something that happened 3 months earlier. And this is where I start. Loretta came in through the kitchen door, stashed her evening snack in the refrigerator, and headed for the front room. There she found Major in his hospital bed, weeping, tears streaming down his pale cheeks. Lord of mercy, Major, honey, what's wrong? Between sobs, he gasped. I've had an altercation with my daughter, the artiste. The telephone lay on the tray table, where Christy May must have left it so he could converse in private. He had a tendency to set the phone on speaker and shout at it on account of his deafness. She refuses to come and visit her poor old father. She claims she's too busy. I reminded her that her mother and I moved in with her grandparents for 2 years before they died. 2 years I was wiping my mother-in-law's ass. The old battle axe hated me, but Ruth, here he broke to sob and hiccup, Ruth won't come for a weekend when she promised. She promised? Loretta asked. Yes, this weekend, though she denies it. Well, I didn't hear about Ruth visiting. In fact, Major often imagined conversations that hadn't taken place and forgot those that had from one moment to the next. In addition, Loretta was pretty sure he had never wiped anyone's behind except his own. Nevertheless, she ached to comfort him. Did she say when she would be coming? I told her not to come. I never want to see her again. I'm sorry I didn't cut her out of my will last year. You know, she tried to put me into a nursing home. No, she didn't. That was a misunderstanding. Loretta had been present for that crisis, one of a series of storms that had whirled through the household, keeping the caregivers busy with gossip and Ruth shuttling between New York and West Virginia, trying to put out fires. It was when Loretta had gotten to know Ruth, when Loretta started calling them the hillbilly and the Yankee. She wants you to stay right here at home and let us take care of you. Don't fret, she loves you. She dabbed at his cheeks with a Kleenex and patted his back to calm the hiccups. She doesn't deserve this farm, doesn't want it either. Nor does her brother. What would they do with 360 acres? Now, Major, you know Hume is coming tomorrow like he does every Friday. You're lucky to have kids who love you and look after you. Lucky you ain't all alone in the world like that old man up on the mountain. What old man? Your spitting image, remember? That collapsed in the aisle of Dixon's IGA last fall with a stroke? I told you the whole story. I don't remember. Major scowled. He hated to be reminded of his failing mind. He'd been so proud of his memory when Loretta first met him, and he'd recited Caesar to her in Latin to show off. I take care of him when I'm not with you. He could be your double. He could be you, except he lives alone in a miserable cabin at the head of a holler without a neighbor or family member to care if he's alive or dead. What he would give to live in a nice house with all us girls around. Well then, Major said, a devilish gleam lighting up his water-soaked eyes. Bring him on down when I'm gone. Ruth and Hume don't need to know. He really looks just like me. It's spooky. I get the creeps every time I go up there and think I'm seeing you in that tumble-down shack. Bring him down when I'm dead. Don't tell a soul. Just bury me up in the high place next to Beatrice. It won't be long now till I'm out of the way. Don't say that, Loretta said. She didn't wail. She didn't cry, but she wanted to. Now, we're going to go back to the bedside. The conversation came rushing back to her as she recounted it to the others, without exactly spelling out its implications. All the while, vague thoughts were forming in the depths of her imagination. Dangerous, bold, tantalizing thoughts, flitting in and out of murky shadows in her mind, calling on her to notice them. She ended her tale ruminating. He's a widower. No kids, no family. No one cares about him. It's pitiful. You felt sorry enough for him to do his shopping and cleaning without hardly getting paid is what I remember, Tammy said. He pays me what he can, which ain't much, but that's not the point. Nobody should be so lonesome. It's sad. Loretta followed her idea through mental thickets like a hunter stalking prey, through darkness toward light, her own pulse quickening, not knowing if what she was pursuing was salvation or perdition, or how she would know the difference. When there's this nice big house with all of us. Tammy placed Major's hand on his chest, on top of the blanket, and smoothed it wistfully. It was a fine hand. What do you mean? It's what Major asked us to do. We should do it for him. It was a raw moment, with Major staring up at who knows what, all their nerve endings pinging with sorrow and anxiety. He don't have to die. We can keep him alive in our hearts. Cass stopped sniffling and looked at Loretta like she was the devil. Are you crazy, Loretta? Screw loose? No, I ain't. By now, she was getting close enough to the idea to see it more clearly. It didn't appear overly diabolical, but she approached it cautiously, testing out its moral threat, on her guard against any whiff of foul intentions. Major dies, it's pure heartache for Hume and Ruth. Ruth has to drag her fancy ass down here and get everything in order. They got this big farm neither of them wants, and all their parents' stuff to sort through and disturb their lives. A good person would surely want to spare the kids from such affliction. It would be only righteous. If he don't die, we still have our jobs. His kids don't have to stress. We just carry on like we've been doing. Everybody's happy. So exactly how are you planning to pull this off? Tammy asked. With a touch of bravado, Loretta revealed the outlines of her idea, now beginning to glow in something like holy luminescence, its details still coming into shape. There's no one to go looking for that old man up in the holler if he disappears. Silence greeted this suggestion. Loretta waited nervously for the vision it conjured to insinuate itself from her imagination into theirs, so that they could share in its magical awakening. Loretta listened for a sign, something to guide them. Sometimes the old farmhouse creaked, but there was no wind tonight. They were deep in the country, not a car engine or a nearby house to break the solitude. All the girls were afraid of the dark and kept the curtains drawn at night to keep it out. Coyotes had killed Major's favorite cat, and now bears were coming down from the hills. You are crazy, Loretta, Cass said. I've got my professional reputation to think about. Think about this. You still get to come to work. Nothing changes. We get our Major back. Suppose your old man gives us away. He don't talk. He can't. Stroke took him. No one will ever know. Just us three. So that is how it sets out. And just a couple more pages. So Loretta calls up her husband and his two brothers to come and help them bury the Major. So already it's more than 3 people who know. And as the story goes on, more and more people find out about the switch. And so the sort of suspense of the novel is, are they going to be able to pull this off? I'm going to pause and take a sip of water. So, yeah. And I guess one of the questions that a lot of people have asked me is how autobiographical this is. Hello. And I'm pretty forthcoming. So I have set the story in Sinkhole County. And when I was in West Virginia, everybody wanted to know, okay, where's Sinkhole County? It's a real county where my parents lived and had caregivers, and there was a big farm. And the whole time that I was coming down from New York and my brother was coming down from where he lived 50 miles away in West Virginia, the caregivers were always saying, oh, you're going to be writing a novel about us, aren't you? Oh, no. And so they have been at the edge of their seats, waiting all this time. And it took me a while to get around to it. And because, well, for one thing, I had the characters and I had the setting, and I love settings. And so place is super important to me. But I didn't have a plot, a frame, a something. And it wasn't until I came up with the idea of the switch. And the switch, I don't know where that idea came from. It just came out of the clear blue sky. The switch is, of course, pure fiction. Nobody ever switched out a dead body. And many of the characters in the novel will be able to recognize themselves. And some of them some of them have been really super excited about it. Well, they all are, and love it. And I'm really happy about that. And part of this, I call this my Appalachian book tour. And part of it was to bring the novel home to its birthplace in Appalachia. And I've had so many interesting conversations with people. And, you know, Appalachians feel like they're at the bottom of the social heap. And I got a lot of that in West Virginia particularly. I mean, it's usually either number 49 or 50 on every scale. West Virginians like to say, thank God for Mississippi. And they got like, and then Sinkhole County, stop me if I'm running off at the mouth too much.
It's your show.
Oh, okay. So I had a lot of people say, Sinkhole County? That's such a nasty sounding thing. Sounds like plumbing. Well, I don't know how many of you know, sinkholes are actually a geological feature, a place in limestone country where the earth caves in and it creates this bowl. And sometimes at the bottom of the bowl, there's a little hole that leads into a cave. And sometimes they happen quite suddenly and they can swallow cars and houses. So they're not popular in some places, but everybody had, and they're very common in Monroe County, West Virginia, and they're common in a lot of places. West Virginia farmers, you know, up until recently used them to throw their dead cattle and other refuse that, I mean, what are you going to do with a dead cow? Bury it in a sinkhole. So I just found them fascinating. My parents loved them. And so the county got named Sinkhole. And then my friend in California said, but do you want it to be ugly? Do you want, you know, is that what you're going for? No. West Virginia, Appalachia is beautiful. So I got on the computer and I Googled West Virginia images. And this cover painting showed up. And it happened to be
great cover.
It happened to be painted by Barry Vance, who happened to be an artist I knew, a good friend of my brother, a member of my gallery when I was a painter in New York. So small world. So I got in touch with Barry and I said, oh, Barry, can I use your painting on the cover of my book? And he was really happy.
Did he charge you?
He did not charge me. I sent him a little gift.
Now you said to me you had one more small passage to read. Do you want to read?
Yes, I can read another passage.
We can open it up to people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm trying to decide which other passage.
I haven't gotten too far, I have to admit, into the book yet.
Okay.
I'm enjoying it. My question, and I'll wait till you're done, is how does this major fake take to having to play the role?
Yes.
That's my question.
Well,
you don't have to answer it right now.
I will answer it later. I won't answer it yet. Read the book. Yeah, I'm trying to decide. I'm going to read a short one. It's my quote sex scene. It's not really a sex scene. And when I told somebody it was a sex scene, they said, I don't remember sex in that. Okay.
I think the window is a 10-minute window before we open it up.
Okay. This is 4 minutes.
Read it slow.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Through the kitchen window, Loretta watched Hume come down the farm road from the high place and go straight to his car without stopping into the house again. He knows, she thought. So time has passed. They thought that they could have the major's son come and sit at his bedside and not notice that they had switched out his dead father. But he figures it out. And I won't go into the whole story of how he figured it out. A chill rippled through Loretta from scalp to toes. They'd be busted. The girls would blame it all on her. Loretta's idea. Loretta's old man she brought down the mountain from Mudlick Hollow to impersonate the major. Is that a crime? Oh dear Jesus, you better believe it is. That hanging judge would lock her up same as he had her father-in-law. He had it in for the Hardwicks, him and his stately old house that had been in the Arbuckle family for 5 or 10 generations. Judge Arbuckle, who did come to my reading, considered the Hardwicks to be redneck trash, she was sure, when he thought about them at all. Loretta felt sick to her stomach. How long would it take Hume to report her to the cops? Damn the world that made her fight so hard to hold on to this job. Damn Beaver, her husband, and that twat in his office. She hadn't believed the rumors flying around about him last year. Beaver wasn't so big a catch he could afford to be fooling around. Then came the morning, she forgot his lunchbox, so she picked it up on her way out the door. After she dropped the kids off at school, she headed down the highway to Hard Rock Construction. The office was nothing more than a double wide in the middle of a gravel pit. Beaver's truck and a red Camry, the only vehicles in the lot. Loretta parked and strode to the door, which rang a bell as she shoved through it, in a hurry to get to her main project of the day, to turn over the vegetable garden while she had use of the neighbor's rototiller before she had to go to work. The office was empty. Doris, Loretta shouted, my husband here? Not waiting for an answer, she pushed through the back room where she found Beaver and the secretary of Hard Rock Construction in flagrante on an old couch with springs that squeaked in time to Beaver's thrusting through the fleshy thighs. Oh my God, Doris shrieked. I ain't your God, Loretta snapped, hardly believing her eyes. Beaver rolled off and struggled to sit, pushing aside the naked legs of the half-dressed secretary. Loretta, shit, his member withered. I ain't shit either, Loretta said, enraged, advancing on her husband with murder in her eyes. Beaver raised his hands to fend her off. Loretta raised the metal lunchbox as if to smash it into his face. Don't do it, baby, Beaver cried. It's the first time. Never again, I swear. Loretta released the latch, raining down a torrent of bologna, bread, ketchup, mayo, relish, and sliced onion onto Beaver's head. She grabbed the quart of Mountain Dew, unscrewed the cap, and emptied it in a shower over both Beaver and Doris. She dropped the bucket on the floor, turned around and left. You forgot your lunch, she said on the way out. She drove home, shut herself in the bathroom, and cried for an hour. Loud screaming, wailing cries torn from her belly, like she imagined a wild elephant would cry over the death of its mate. She couldn't stop it. Tears and snot poured down her face. She gripped the edge of the sink. The crying subsided into gulping sobs. She looked in the mirror at her bloated red eyes. She washed her face in cold water. Then the crying erupted again, built into anguished keening, juices spouting again from eyes and nose. It went on, the cycle repeating, crying and washing and crying and washing, until she was done. Then she went outside and rototilled the garden, finishing just in time for work. Less than 5 minutes. Okay.
It's a great scene.
So
Let's open it up to,
all right.
you got a crowd. You got a crowd.
Ask questions. We have a little audience here. Oh, and we have, Okay.
Patricia. So
Yes, we have Patricia.
I want to just to remind you, the live audience, if you have a question, Sebastian is going to repeat it so that the virtual audience can hear it. And that means if you have a long preamble, if you have several compound questions, Sebastian will be the verbal editor of your question and make it into a succinct question so that the audience can hear it and we won't tax his memory too much. So have mercy upon us.
It's not just memory, it's a capacity to learn, never mind.
Okay, so who's going to be the point of the spear?
Well, I know Deborah's, I've read all your books, so I do know that partly because I've lived in Guatemala for over 12 years. And they're all set in Guatemala, the other ones.
Hold on one second. This is Mary Jo. She knows Deborah from Guatemala. She's read all her books. It's been about 12
I was
years.
going to do a preamble. But my curiosity is that in all the other books, I was really surprised how much humor is in this book, that it's a very, it's just a total different thing than the other ones. And so.
Hold on. She's surprised that this book is actually very humorous because the other books, not so much in that. That's not the flavor of them, but okay.
So just, where does that spring from? Not that you're not a engaging, funny person, but your books didn't reflect that. So where does that come from?
Where does the humor come from?
That's such a great question. And when Mary Jo pointed that out to me, I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about it. And I love it when people notice things in my books that I hadn't noticed myself. And I think, I can't even explain. It's just that partly the humor came from the subject being so dark, and the framework, the caper being so wild and ridiculous that I wanted to relieve the darkness. I mean, it was not even intentional. It just came with the territory. And I mean, when I came up with this idea of switching out bodies, I thought, that is so ridiculous. I love the idea. I'm just going to go with it, but it's laughable, and so yeah, and there are actually serious themes in the book. There's a lot about death, obviously, and caregiving, and I could spin on and on, but let me stick with the question right now. And class. The book is really full of commentary on class and class divisions and so forth. So there are serious themes, but I just had so much fun, and I guess it came from the fun. Yeah.
It could be a Coen Brothers film.
I thought so too, actually. Yeah, I didn't think of the cones, but I thought it would make it great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, is there any interest?
Can we do a virtual question? We'll toggle back and forth and do a virtual question and a live audience.
Do I have to translate what you say to them?
No tiene que traducir mi información a mi pregunta y no tiene que repetir mi pregunta. Gracias por tu ayuda. So I don't need you to translate it and I don't need you to repeat it.
I didn't need that
Because,
translation.
because I'm right here by the mic, so it's going to work. We got it. Deborah, question from the virtual audience. What was the best editorial feedback you received?
Wow. Oh, actually, I got it. So my writing group, when I gave them the first chapter, that section that I read you without the flashback wasn't in it. Loretta went straight in to, let's just switch out the bodies. And my writing group said, that was a little sudden. Don't you think that, I mean, how could she have come up with that in like 5 minutes at the bedside of this man who's just died, who she loved and said she couldn't bear to be with him when he passed. And all of a sudden she comes up with this wild scheme. So I put in the flashback and had the major suggest it.
Question?
I was just gonna ask, has there been any interest in a film?
In Spanish?
Hay interés en una película para usted. Y su
Is there gonna
libro.
be a film? Are the film rights bought yet?
They haven't been bought yet.
Okay,
I do see so I started out as a painter. And so I have to visualize every scene. So I see it like a movie. I bring my characters in, I know where everybody is. I'm not sure the reader knows exactly as I do, but I do my best to create a visual scene. And people are always saying that my books, all of them, not just this one, read like movies. You can see the scenes.
so I'm curious, if you have awareness, is your narrator just a kind of omniscient? I mean, it's also able to go into all these different people's heads. Do you feel like it's like oftentimes these in books like this where there's a regional sense, it's like almost the consciousness of the region, or is a person who's like the person who understands the town and knows all the gossip? Is it that kind of narrator that's got a bit of an embodiment, or is it really just a kind of floating
So
angelic?
actually, and I only read you portions from Loretta's point of view, but the novel shifts points of view. So we see Loretta's, we see the daughter, we see the son, we see some of the other caregivers. We even see the old man who had the stroke. Eventually, he starts to have some thoughts that come in. So I have what a wonderful teacher of mine once called an intrusive narrator.
Nice.
And she's a third person narrator, but she's like really hovering, and she comes in and she tries to inhabit each character in their
That's what it
session.
felt like, yeah.
Mhm. It's a close third,
Yeah.
as we say in the business.
Virtual question. How did you get your big break in writing?
Oh. You just keep writing. Pure persistence. And so actually Vermont Studio Center. Well, when I segued from being a visual artist, I wrote and illustrated a children's picture book, and it found a publisher miraculously. And everybody thought, oh, well, Deborah wants to become an illustrator. Well, no, actually, Deborah wanted to become a writer. And so I wrote for children for a while, but didn't have much luck or success. And secretly, I always wanted to write a novel for adults. And so I had a residency at Vermont Studio Center where I met with some writers from New York. And at any rate, I don't know that was my break in writing, but it started me on the path of thinking of myself as a writer, coming out of the closet, as it were, and going to writing workshops. And so I wrote my first novel, Todos Santos, and I also wrote short stories, and I sent them off, and they got published, and that was wonderful. And so just persistence. I mean, it was about managing to see hundreds of rejection slips for every one acceptance, and not taking it personal.
Which of your novels is the most autobiographical? Because I know a bit about your life, but I don't know exactly which one. So
Which one of your novels is the most autobiographical?
Well, I think most of my novels I show up in a bit, although not so much in, well, not in Remedios. I think I'm in Remedios at all. No, I'm not. But the first one is an American woman and her teenage son having adventures and misadventures in Guatemala. And so some of the stuff in there, I had a son, I had adventures. There's a kidnapping that never happened in real life. And so I guess Todos Santos and this one would be the most autobiographical, definitely. And I just tell people, you know, I take people from real life, but I make them do things they would never do in real life. And people that I know have seen themselves in my books, and so far nobody has hated me, so far as I know.
Question from the virtual audience. Could you describe a typical, if there is one, writing day for you?
Okay. So I'm kind of a, you know, 9 to 5 girl. I get up, well, maybe 9 is a bit early. I get up, I have a cup of coffee, I sit down at the computer, and I chain myself to the computer. And I write sometimes, and well, one thing is I never make chapter outlines, so I don't know where the novel is going. And so so I write it to find out what is going to happen. And so depending on where I am in a novel, I might have to reread, you know, the last chapter or the last few pages that I wrote and say, oh, what happens next? And so I write and and take breaks and, you know, check Facebook and do some research and then actually one of my secret weapons is I liked in the afternoon after I've put in a few hours or enough hours, maybe I got 500 words, not usually. That's always my goal. I like to go for a run because often, and I never listen to music or anything when I'm running. I just run, jog actually. And I'm wrestling with problems in the writing and I'm thinking, what's happening with, and ideas come to me when I'm running. And my theory is that it's the increased oxygen to the blood flowing into my brain that really helps. So it's kind of 9 to 5 and yeah, that's my typical writing day.
Sebastian, would you like to share your typical writing day if you have one?
Similar, I'm not a runner, I'm a walker, but, and I never thought of the oxygen, I thought it was more the ambulation, the movement.
That too, probably.
I also don't, I live in a neighborhood where it's not safe to have headphones on. You need to be able to listen all the way around to know what's coming at you. But yeah, no, I work in the morning, take a break. I'm also a writing coach, so I do that work and then I go back and work for a couple hours, take a break, and then editing it in the afternoon. But I kind of get, two things for me was the Vermont Studio Center, going there for 2 weeks and getting in that mode, and a thing called the grind, which is you get connected to other writers through an email and you just write every day. You agree to write every day for a month and send your work to that group. And there's no feedback, you just do it. So you just get up and you do the work. And so when I get it going on a project, it's just maybe 2 hours, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe half an hour, but every day I got to do it. I can't stop that rhythm. So yeah.
We're getting toward the top of the hour.
One more
but
question for
yeah.
Deborah, or?
I actually do.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm from southwestern Louisiana with in Lafayette, which is very Cajun,
Mhm.
and their ability to just tell a story in just one sentence and it reminds me of like Loretta in your book. Did you have any concerns about fully representing who these people are in their turf?
Yes.
Hold on one second. So Beth is saying that she's from Louisiana and she's kind of impressed by the way folks there can often tell a story really succinctly and authentically. And she wonders if Deborah ever wonders about her characters from West Virginia, if she worries that she hasn't totally kind of covered their point of view fully.
And I certainly worried about that. And of course, cultural appropriation is
Right.
such a buzzword for the last 10 years, and I've been accused of it. I can't tell you how many times. I mean, Guatemala, West Virginia, blah, blah, blah.
Where's blah, blah, blah?
Just up the road, yeah. And so, yeah, and I particularly, at least in Guatemala, the people I was writing about couldn't speak my language, so they couldn't read my books. So although I would tell them about the books and everything that went on in them, most of them didn't actually read them. So here in West Virginia, I was faced with trying to portray people who I loved and respected in a way that was not stereotyped, not disrespectful, and sympathetic, or, you know, the best I could do. And I said it to them. I sent it to West Virginia.
That's the move.
And I said, read this, point out the errors. And they did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's the move. Tell me where I get it wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think you want to wrap it up?
I would love to.
Because it's your show.
It's your show. And with a final kind of concluding remark about what's next and any final thoughts.
what's next? Well, people have been asking me, and I'm actually working now on a novel set in New York City.
Oh, there you
So
go.
we'll
Your
see.
backyard.
Yeah,
Okay.
my back river. So New
East
York
side
is,
or west side?
it's an island surrounded by water, and I'm deeply involved with the water around New York City.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for being here and speaking
you.
with Sebastian, for both of you for reading and being such wonderful conversationalists.
I want to just thank you. I want to thank Malaprops for being so welcoming. Thanks, Sebastian, for being such a fabulous host and making this possible. And yeah, coming back to my birth state. I'm a Tar Heel.
Congratulations.